Hey, this is Troy Taylor with the Championship Football Coaches Clinic Podcast, sponsored by Reps VR, First Down Playbook, Rack Coach, The Top Hopper, Sideline Design Sports Workbook, and Tip of the Spear. Today we have on Brian Eggleton, who has become my friend over the last few weeks. I think, Brian, we met because you hit me up over the podcast, and then your players down at Miami when I'm down in Miami. So remind me, Brian, how did we meet? And tell us a little bit about yourself for all the people watching. MK's watching. She's a 7th grader from Indiana. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'd watched some of your podcasts in and out, and I think I come across you from Coach McAnally's podcast and seen the name. So put two and two together, and then just, right place, right time. I got one of my kids down at Miami on a recruiting trip. The same time you're down there with Coach Mirabal, and things just kind of worked out from there.
Yeah, man.
So it's funny, like I said, with technology and how it works, and years ago when I first started coaching, we were still in VHS tapes as far as sending tapes out to coaches and recruiting goes, and with all the stuff online now, it's really good for the kids. It gives them a lot of exposure, and helps them out in that recruiting process. But even as coaches, I remember when I first started coaching, we would have our film breakdown on Sunday morning. We would spend 4 or 5 hours breaking film down just to get tendencies and stuff. And then you got these young guys today that hit the button on huddle and it breaks everything down for you already. And they just don't understand, some of the processes we had to go through. But time efficient. I'm always on my guys about time efficiency, and it's really helped the coaching profession, and it's helped the kids.
Yeah. How many years have you been coaching the offensive line? And where did you grow up, and where all of you coached, Brian? And MK, we're doing great.
Believe it or not, I've coached in the same place, and this is where I played at and grew up at. I graduated in 1990, played football here. Was lucky enough to go play at a Division II school up in Northern Ohio, Tiffin, and then I only played there for a year. And probably my greatest regret, but my old coach said, you know what, there's no sense of crying over spilled milk.
Mm-hmm.
I'd got a job and was making a lot of money, and just thought that was more important than football at the time. And you know what? It worked out in its ways, and that's just how life rolls sometimes. And so then I got into coaching wrestling here at our school, 94, 95. And then football just kind of automatically comes into the picture, late 90s, early 2000s. So I've been probably on and off coaching football for the past 20, 23 years. I hung it up for a while. My wife, Jennifer, me and her had twin daughters, and it was kind of hard justifying, going off coaching football and the hours that we spend on that, and her sitting home with, 2 twin infant babies. So they're going into their junior year now, 16, 17 years old. And it works out. They're in the marching band. So I do my thing quarters 1 through 4, and they do their thing in halftime. And everybody goes home happy. So that's kind of how that's come about. So I'm back in it this past year. I just got back into it. Last year was kind of getting my feet on the ground, getting used to the kids. Even though I knew the kids, I teach here at our middle school, and I already had those players in class. They knew me, I knew them, and that really helped out. But still, just working with the new staff and getting used to those people was a process. So going into my second year here, I'm a little more aggressive into it. All of a sudden, like we said, we've got a couple of Division I players that I've got some offers. Some of not just our linemen, but some of our other players. And we're really getting ready to get it cranked up here.
How did the game change, or what changed over the time period that you were gone from the game? How many years was that? And, was there anything that really stood out?
I left the coaching game in 2009, and had come back for a year and then still didn't, feel right being away all that time. And so from 2009 to just this past year, what's changed in the game is the speed in which it's played, especially sideline to sideline. A lot of the defenses. When I first coached, we were still facing consistent defenses where if they showed that the week prior to the opposing team, 9 times out of 10, that's what you were going to get that week. And so we were still blocking, drawing lines on boards and saying, hey, this is who you got no matter what. Well, with a lot of movement in the game, a lot of speed of the game, moving that to inside zone, outside zone blocking schemes, that's the biggest change that I've seen.
So when you came back to the game from 2009 to, I guess, 2023, you got a hold of Coach McNally on Twitter, and did you start watching his videos? Or
so funny story with Coach. Everybody knows he's the GOAT, and where we are located at is about 20 miles from Wilmington. And if you know anything about Cincinnati Bengals, that was their summer training camp.
Coach Ramsire.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Bill Ramsire.
Yes,
Bill
I know
Ramsire
Bill.
was my college coach.
Yeah. So when he moved to Virginia, we're down there, yeah. And so,
small world, brother. Small world.
It's crazy. So my cousin, who's a diehard Cincinnati everything fan, he's like, hey, we're going down and watch the Bengals practice. He was into the autographs and all this stuff, and Boomer Esiason and Ickey Woods. And me, I'm over there with the linemen. So you have all these people at these practices, and there's, 5,000 people there, and 4,999 of them are over watching Boomer Esiason and the running backs. And here's me over with the offensive linemen. And so I'm standing over there, and what happens is the linemen come out, and they kind of, it's pro football. They stretched on their own. And the linemen weren't even allowed on the game field until they ran team scrimmage. They were practicing back behind the stadium there at Wilmington. And so and I knew all these guys just from TV and watching, here comes Dave Remington, and here comes Anthony Munoz, and here comes Max Montoya and Bruce Kozerski, and I'm just ripping them off. And these guys are giants. And so, and I knew of Coach McNally, and I've never met him, just briefly and talked to him on Twitter a little bit. And I'm like, well, who coaches this group? I mean, this guy has to be a half and half of Zeus and Goliath. And here comes Mouse come running out, and I'm like, but he those guys knew that he was the guy. And so that's sort of my connection to Coach McNally.
Wow. He was the guy, man. And he's still the guy. And man, you know that I'm the guy that got him on Twitter. I told you that, right?
Yeah. Yes.
That's coaching. To teach an 80-year-old man how to change his profile picture and name to Coach McNally OL took me 2 hours. But man, the world's never been the same. He said,
and now
his life.
Now he's on there dancing.
Yeah.
Now he's putting on Dancing Clinic. But and when I first started following him, he was still doing the his blocking progressions in his bathroom there, and using the little stool that in his bathroom. And I'd called my cousin, and it's just like, look at this. This is a legend, and he's in his bathroom with his house shoes on, and his wife's probably going to yell at him if he breaks something. But it was just all this knowledge coming out of it.
Yeah, as a teacher, both of us are teachers. You got to respect a guy who is a lifelong learner. And I tell him he's the greatest coach of all time because he's the greatest learner. I mean, he never stopped learning. He's always trying to find something new, a better way. And that's got to be motivating for, I mean, you've been around the game since the 90s and you watched him coach for the Bengals. And for him to still be doing it for free, I mean, pretty much, I mean, how big of a help has he been to you, getting back into the game and coaching offensive line?
Just like you said, showing me the fact that us old timers, you have to be able to change with the game. I remember reading an article about from Joe Thomas playing at Wisconsin, where it was like, we're going to run you over, and here we come. And then him going to the Browns and him describing it as basketball on field turf, as far as the speed of the game and having to change his game. And so for him being able, if he can look at it and say, hey, this, and you got to understand, and he come from, University of Buffalo in the, late 60s, early 70s. And they were still elbow blocking then. And then as 70s, 80s, as the decades have come on, he has moved along with the times and is still moving along with the times.
Yeah, no doubt. I talked to him on the phone today, because the coach from Dayton, who was my friend, he called me. And the reason he called me was because he went to school with Coach McNally's son. Because Coach McNally's son and Coach McNally's daughter both went to Dayton.
Right.
Yeah, he wanted to talk to me. So tell me a little bit about your big offensive lineman that's got all the offers. What's so good about him? And I mean, I know he's huge.
Yeah, I had talked to him in the weight room the other day, and I said, Coach Mirabal, did he call you a big joker? And he said, no. I said, well, he was probably thinking that. I said, if he's using the word joker, that means you're a big bad dude. Big kid, still growing. 6'7", I weighed him out the other day at 290, right at 290. And as quick as a cat. And he's still got a lot of growth he needs to do. He's still got to get some core strength build up. But that's most kids, and a lot of people don't understand. Adam's just finishing up his sophomore year. And I'd asked him the other day, I said, have you even started shaving yet? He says, I shave about once a month. So the kid's obviously still growing into his body. When we visited Ohio State, Coach Fry had said, you are just a great, big, huge kid. And when you fill out and are ready, you're going to be a lot to handle. And so that's the process we're in now with him. Really good feet for a big kid, and can really move. I mean, he's just, even if he gets those big paws on you, you're in trouble. And so, he is 24, 25 offers now by the end of his sophomore year, and he's still got a lot of growing to do.
Yes. He was an amazing kid to get to meet. That was awesome, man, that we worked it out where I could see him and meet him at the same time I was down there seeing Coach Mirabal. For the coaches who may be, a rec coach or a young coach, like, what do you think is the most important thing about coaching the offensive line, and where should they start?
A lot of people say, of course, footwork. If you can't move your feet in traffic and multitask those things together, you can't play offensive line. I've heard from a few great coaches, what are they looking for? Head, hands, feet. And so, you're looking for kids that can, and you have to, just like anything else, there's things you can coach, like footwork. You can improve that. You can coach hand placement and blocking progressions. You can coach them the thinking part of it, But what you can't coach is that size and how they use that. As far as, you know, if I'm looking for kids with big frames, and they're looking for kids with big frames, and they're looking for kids with long arms, and that's genetics, and there's not a darn thing I can do for it. But as a coach, I can identify those kids. So really, when we're developing offensive linemen, first thing we're looking at is identifying, what bodies we got. Now, if you're not 6'7", 290 pounds, that doesn't matter. We've got, I mean, my starting guard from one of my starting guards last year he's probably 5'9" and $190, and you didn't want to be on the other end of him trap blocking you.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, so you have to look for it. His was mentality. He would light up when we called. He would come over during games. Sometimes defense, they're running, doing a lot of slanting with 3-and-1 techniques, or twos, and sometimes trap's not always there. But this kid was just foaming at the mouth. When are we going to run a trap block? He was just waiting, for that was his thing. And so, the frame is not necessarily a deal breaker. We've got a lot of kids 6 foot, 5'11", like I said, as small as 5'9", 5'8". They got the mentality to play offensive line and work ethic. We'll throw them in there.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's so special about high school football, man, is that, I mean, you don't get to recruit. You don't have all 6'7", 290, but you got a kid who's tough and can't get on the field anywhere else, but he just loves the game and he wants to help the team. And it's an unselfish position.
Yes.
So
we link it up to coal mining profession. That's our breakout during practice during the week, is digging coal. We're underground. Nobody sees the work we're doing. It's dangerous work. You're going to have come out of there with bloody hands. But in the end, you're not going to get your picture in the paper. But in the end, when the game's won, you've got a feeling that you helped accomplish that more than anybody else out there in there. And so that's sort of our mantra here at my school.
So what are like the 3 most important things that you coach in the offensive line? What do you stress?
What do I stress, of course, is, a lot of it, and it's sort of, I don't have that one coach that I follow, that I take things from. I'm sort of a melting pot of all these different coaches. So like Coach Mirabal, a lot of his outside zone stuff, that's, I asked Adam, I said, if he showed you outside zone stuff, that's where I got it from. Can't coach that first step, but second step, third step, keep your outside arm, free. So I look at that. Coach Bosted used to be at Wisconsin, is at Indiana. He is what I'm coaching. I tell my kids it is ball game on. And that Indy time that I have is the most precious time in the world. So we focus on all our stuff in that Indy time. If they got questions, yes, ask them. But we'll goof off after practice on the way out the door. And I've learned that from Coach Bosted. He is all business when he is on the field. But at the same time, even though I'm coaching big kids, they've got real world problems as well. And so, talking, guys like Ron Crook from Virginia Tech. Coach Crook's got a personal connection to my head coach, Jerry Williams, and I get to spend a lot of time, and I got a lot of access to Coach Crook, who was at Cincinnati with Coach Fickle when they were in the championship Final Four there, worked at West Virginia for a while. But he understands that the offensive lineman is a building process. It happens over time. You'll see good Division I college athletes, receivers, your skill position kids. They can show up and they've already got that talent. I've never seen an offensive lineman show up to my practice and, be ready, have all of those skills in place and be ready for the next level. So we're really focused on technique. I don't try to put the first running play in until we get to our first camp day, because by then our offense coordinator, head coach, he's itching to try to run a few of our base plays. So we work technique right up to the point where I can't work technique anymore. I mean, we got to at least put a play in to run. So that's really my focus, is getting them, and then getting them to understand the technique. Why do what I have to do to get to this point, and really help them understand. And a lot of it is them understanding the entire play itself. The old days, it was line up, figure out the guy who's across from you, and knock the snot out of him. And football's not like that anymore. Offensive line play is not like that anymore.
That is true. And Coach Bald, my friend from St. Petersburg, he said my favorite O-line coaches are Coach Matt Bland. That was his high school coach. Coach Steve Saunier from West Florida. Coach Bob Wiley, who was his personal friend, and Coach McNally. And he says, who are you guys' favorites? Great podcast, by the way. Thank you, Coach Bald. So you've already said a few, Brian. Who are
yeah.
I asked you the same thing, and you texted to me. I think.
Harry Heastand at Notre Dame comes to mind. I mean, you want to talk about a guy that was in the offensive line profession for a long time. He's an offensive line coach who used to be an offensive line coach a long time ago, but has been one of the great head coaches, I think, as far as taking not so high talent and getting unbelievable mileage out of. And that's Coach Niumatalolo now at San Jose State, but was at Navy.
Yeah, no doubt. And, going to Miami, we watched the Lions offensive line. And the Lions offensive line this year, I don't know the name of the coach, Alex does, but they were awesome. And then when I went to Colorado State, we watched the 49ers, Chris Forrester, and we watched them a lot. And then we started watching the Browns because Bill Best, O-line coach at Colorado State, he loves Bill Callahan and Scott Peters.
Yes. Yeah, Bill Callahan is another. He was at Wisconsin as well. I'm a big Wisconsin fan, if you can't tell. And I was, Barry Alvarez, Western Pennsylvania, Bill Callahan, all those guys. I was talking to my tackle the other day about, the Wisconsin big offensive tackles out of Wisconsin, and I'm just ripping them off. Yeah, and I'm just ripping them off, and he's like, who are these guys? And I'm talking about Havenstein and Aaron Gibson and, Joe Rudolph and on and on and on. Outstanding offensive lineman that Bill Callahan put out when he was at Wisconsin.
So was Bill Callahan the offensive line coach when Ron Dane was the running back?
Yeah, I believe so. I don't know if all 4 years that Ron was there. But I know he was there early on, probably 94, 95 still, before he moved moved into some professional football. He was head coach for the Raiders, was he not, for a while? Yeah.
Yeah, when Gruden left, he took over as head coach. Yeah, and Jay Norvell, I never got a chance to ask Coach Norvell about Barry Alvarez, but, man, I was so impressed with Jay Norvell. If there's a better person that's a head coach in this country that knows as much football as him, I want to meet him. So did you ever get a chance to see Jay Norvell coach or be around Jay at all?
No, I have not. I just know that through his association, he played at Wisconsin. I think his dad was also an administrator there before he went on to Michigan State. So that's really what I know of Jay Norvell is what his time. Actually, he played at Iowa. And I think Jay might have coached a year
he coached
or two.
at Wisconsin. You know your stuff, man.
Yeah,
you're like a human computer.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Yeah, you're hitting them all. I mean, because you even knew he went to Iowa.
Yeah.
Played for Hayden Fry. So
you want to talk about a coaching staff? Look at Hayden Fry's coaching staffs at Iowa. Holy smokes! You're talking Barry Alvarez, Stoops was there with them. Who was at Kansas State?
Bill Snyder.
I mean, it was a who's who list of coaches. I think it was 84 Rose Bowl when Iowa was there, and they had the coach's picture outside of the Rose Bowl. And I mean, they were all famous.
If, like, just thinking about this, because you're such a football historian, and we're talking about building high school offensive linemen, like, what offensive lineman, NFL or college, either one, what offensive lineman would you tell your kids to go watch and maybe pull up on YouTube that they may not know? Somebody, that was before they were born, and then we can move into modern day, but somebody from the 80s or the 90s, or I guess the 2000s now.
Well, and really, position wise, looking at center, and that you can't go back too far because the game is really, I don't think they would identify. But you look at what Mike Webster accomplished with Pittsburgh Steelers as a center. You look at guards, old school. I mean, there's a lot of people. 95% of the people out there couldn't tell you, who offensive linemen were in the 70s and 80s and 90s. And Jesse Sapulu, 49ers. Oh, yeah.
I had him on the podcast.
Yeah, I've watched some of the stuff he's done podcasts. He's a nice guy. So, there's the Hannah.
I had Randy Cross on too.
Yeah. Randy's good friends with Coach Niumatalolo, I believe. And, he's a Maryland guy in that. But, you look at some of the old, just different positions. I could really pinpoint Hilgenberg at center. I believe he was from Colorado and played for the Saints for a while. Into the 90s. Of course, everybody in the state of Ohio knows Anthony Munoz as a legend. And, so it's in that time period when I was growing up, even guys that didn't have really long careers. Tony Mandrich from Michigan State. I remember when he came out, everybody's like, holy cow, look at this guy.
Yeah.
And he struggled with injuries in his pro career, but a lot of these kids, even the linemen today, I think they get so wrapped up in these star athletes. I don't know if I'll go in. We got a weight session tomorrow. I'll go in and ask them if they can name an NFL lineman and see how many of them could do that.
Yeah, I would be interested. You can text me after to see if they know it, but if they play offensive line, they should know these guys. I mean, Kelsey, he's got to be one of the best centers of all time. Modern day guys that play now or played within the last 10 years, who are some guys that kids or coaches want to show, hey, man, this is the way you do it right here?
To me, especially being here in Ohio, that's Joe Thomas. What he accomplished with Cleveland Browns, what was that record number of starts that he'd made, as an offensive lineman. And so that if there's one guy out there that I point to and say, hey, go watch this guy do it, it would be Joe.
Yeah, he was great. He definitely was great. So anybody else you can think of that's starting now or still in the league?
That's still in the league of course, Peninsula with the Lions with Coach Mirabal. I know that's who you guys were watching down there the other day. Of course, the big tackle with 49ers, Trent Williams. He's on the main side.
Wyatt Teller for the Browns. He's from Virginia. He's great.
There's I don't know if he's still in the league or not. Alex Mack played for the Browns at center and guard for a while. One of Coach Bosted's guys he probably graduated college in 2006 or 7. And I think he's still playing, is Zeitler, Kevin Zeitler. So I think I saw he got signed for one more year with the Ravens here, maybe. So, you look at guys that can play offensive line and play that long in the league, they've accomplished something, because that is a tough job, and it's hard on your body.
If a young coach wanted to learn how to coach the offensive line, where should they start? Would you send them to Coach McNally? Is there maybe somebody that's more basic, or what do you recommend?
Right. I would send them more basic. As much as I love Coach McNally, he's high detailed, and us guys that have been around long enough, can figure that out. I had one of my coaches watching him there one day, and he's off on pillars and posts and clamps and this and that, and he looks at me, and I had to put it into sort of layman's terms. What's he talking about here? So as a young coach getting in, I would just start maybe the Glazer. If you're part of the Glazer Clinic stuff, you have all those videos and stuff on there, and just basic stuff, and build from there. It's sort of like you're building your library, and with YouTube and Twitter and all that stuff, that stuff's out there. When I started coaching, you learn. The only outside film I got to watch was on Saturdays and Sundays when I sat down and watched college and pro teams play.
Yeah,
so,
we were always trying to get the film from the colleges, or you can get an NFL film, but man, I would just record the games. Now everything's on YouTube.
Yes. Yeah, I go back and watch old Monday Night Footballs. You got Don Meredith and Howard Cosell in the booth. I mean, just classic stuff. I when I was a kid, I grew up somewhat of a Raiders fan, and that was my dad's fault, because for some reason, he loved Jim Plunkett. He loved the story of his parents that were both blind and had never seen him play, and
I never knew that. Tell me about that.
I don't know much about it other than what I've kind of read and learned about it. But both of his parents, I don't believe, could see, and they never got to see him play. They would attend games, and people would say, "Hey, this is what's going on." But my dad he was tied in. That was about his time period, 71, 72. Here's Jim Plunkett. He wins the Heisman Trophy. I think he goes to the Patriots. He doesn't play very much there, or doesn't play. He's not outstanding. And, he goes to the Raiders as a backup, and the guy gets hurt. And the next thing you know, he's in the Super Bowl. And that's one of the first Super Bowls I remember sitting down with my dad was watching, is when they beat the Eagles and watched the 1980 Super Bowl.
Yeah, 1980. Sid Gilman, Coach Vermeil. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's just, yeah. And you look at the Raiders, John Madden. You've got the Snake. I mean, you want to talk about nicknames. You got the Snake. You got Dave the Ghost, Casper.
Mad Stork.
Yeah, the Mad Stork, Ted Hendricks. I mean, Phil Villapiano. I mean, just legend after legend rolling out of there. But back to your question. Just as a young guy, I would, just start building slowly what your belief. It's just like anything else. You're building a house. You got to build that foundation. And as an offensive lineman, head, hands, and feet, and start from there. Start building your kids from there.
Like, the technique and everything is great, but for the young coaches, sometimes they try to be the player's friend, or they try to be the tough guy coach. Like, I always think when you're starting out coaching, you kind of emulate your coaches. and then you kind of like find your way, and you find yourself, or you take a little bit from enough people that you find your own identity.
Right.
So dealing with players, what advice would you give them? A guy just getting into it.
Once again, be yourself and remember what you're there for, especially if you're in youth football, middle school football, high school football. I've got, um, I wear a lot of hats as far as I've got a kid that's got 25 Division One offers. I've got kids that are going to be looked at as Division Two or Division Three players, and I've got kids that are there, like we talked earlier. They're there for the memories and having fun,
Yeah.
but still want to play because they love football. And so you got to kind of balance that as far as, knowing each kid. I would say individualize it. You're never going to treat, just as in your classroom, you're going to have that steady standard, but in the end, it's going to be a one-on-one discussion at the very end. And so just being consistent with what you're doing with your kids really plays a big part as for a young coach. Got to know your audience. It's sort of like it's like a lesson plan. You're teaching a lesson. I teach American history. I can go into a lot of detail on certain battles of the Civil War, the Revolution, and some kids really buy into that. And then, of course, the other half is, blah blah blah. What's this guy would be quiet? And so you got to find that happy middle ground that you can get the most connection to everybody. I don't know if you'll ever get everybody 100% buy-in, but you've got to make sure you try to connect everybody the best you can.
Yeah. So for coaches that want to move up in the profession or become a head coach, or what would you suggest to them?
My suggestion, and of course, I'm sort of like Coach Mirabal. I have no intention of ever being a head coach. When I was young, I did, and I saw all the other stuff besides, actually coaching football that you had to do and had to be as a head coach. And of course, with we talk about the game changing. Everybody was watching the Ohio State spring game around here yesterday, and they were interviewing Chip Kelly after or during the game. And it was like, why in the world did you leave Los Angeles as a head coach and come to Columbus as an offense coordinator? And he's just like, I just wanted to coach football. I don't want to, of all the stuff that they deal with now, he didn't want to do it. And so I guess as my advice is, if you want to be a head coach, yes, find those guys and really, just like anything else, really study them, what their foundations are, what their beliefs are. If you can, find out what makes them tick, what do they do. I know a lot of head coaches, a lot of coaches, period, you're dealing with that family balance as far as time you spend at your program and time you spend at your school and your family. So it's, that balance is always a big issue as well. Don't be in a hurry to be a head coach. Like I said early on, I don't want to be a head coach. I'm going to be the guy that calls all the shots. And after about 3 years of coaching, the offensive line coach is fine with me. That's right where I want to be.
I mean, it all starts up front, man. Being there at Colorado State, Al Groh, who was the head coach of the Jets and coach with Parcells and Belichick and Saban, he could not take his eyes off the offensive line. Like, it all starts with the O-line, and those guys are so important.
Yeah, and one of the more famous coaches I know, and you've heard this probably already, is 5 guys but one mind, and getting them to be able to orchestrate that up front at the same time. And sometimes it looks ugly and it doesn't work, but if it has got to start there. And I think one of the things that was impressive at Miami, you've got 2 great offensive line coaches there if you go there to play football with Coach Cristobal and Coach Mirabal. Just the same way in my case, every great offensive line coach that I've ever looked at has got somebody helping them because you're looking at 5 or 6 guys. And, so for me, my guy's Brian White. He coaches tackles and tight ends with me. And then I do centers and guards. And so there's a lot of coaches, and a lot of people don't always hear that second guy, but he's there. And good offensive lines will have those 2 coaches that they can bounce things off of.
Yeah. Anybody else that you wanted to shout out? Brian, I know you've written stuff down. Anything else you want to go over that we haven't talked about?
Just my head coach, Jerry Williams, does a really nice job of, he's like, you do your thing. And he goes, if I'm not happy, you'll hear me. Yeah. And that's, it's how it works. And that's all part of that. And I've coached long enough. I've been on probably 3 or 4 different total staffs here at this school, but we all understood that working relationship. And of course, the other coaches I coach with, you walk in any coach's office room in the United States, those guys are tight. I mean, that's family in there a lot of times as well. So really, the only other person I wanted to say out to was my college offensive line coach. Like I said, I played at Tiffin University up in Northwest Ohio, and I had a coach, a fellow by the name of Andy Dengler, and he was right out of grad school out of Bowling Green, but he had known me. That's actually how I got recruited to Tiffin. He had taught previously at a school about 20 or 30 miles from here. And he remembered me and remembered the name. And that's what I tell my kids. I said, dude, you guys know, even when you think somebody's not watching you, somebody's watching you. And probably more so in today's world with technology than back then. And so he'd watched me play, and he had seen, how my work ethic there and how I played the game. And so he was a pretty cool offensive line coach. He's now he's a scout with the Oakland Raiders or Las Vegas Raiders now. He's one of their scouts. He worked probably for the past 20 years with the Jaguars. He was head of their scouting for a while. So he knows his football too. And that's where I learned a lot. That's where I learned a lot about the college game. High school, I found out about the first 10 minutes of my first college practice that I wasn't in high school anymore. Things were going to be different.
Yeah, no doubt, Brian. So thank you for coming on, brother. We'll have you back on.
Yeah, anytime.
Yeah, man. We had a lot of fun. I'm going to press end here, and then we'll chat for a little bit.
Okay.
Thank you, brother.